The Denver Broncos didn't make a move at the NFL trade deadline. Was that a mistake? We'll share some insight as to why that could be the case and why Denver's perfectly comfortable with standing pat. We'll break that down and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day every single day. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You could check out my written work over there, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com, where you can read his written work alongside NFL Spin Zone. He's got you covered across the board, and we got you covered every day here, talking all things Denver Broncos. The NFL trade deadline has come and gone, and the Broncos, they haven't really done anything outside of the Baron Browning move. Was that a mistake by the Broncos, or is Sean Payton being a little bit forward-thinking? We'll obviously kick off the show with that today, but we'll also wrap up with assessing the rookie class as part of our Broncos Country mailbag, where you, the avid listeners, sent in your questions. We chose some of the best ones, and we'll obviously highlight which players have been good surprises so far throughout the 2024 NFL season. Sayre, obviously, this show is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks. And obviously go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Broncos, not a lot of action on the NFL trade deadline, though some teams around the AFC made some moves, the Pittsburgh Steelers being one of those teams, but not quite the movement I think we expected to see league-wide, especially with some of the names that were mentioned. Denver standing pat once again at the deadline.
Yeah, I don't love it, Cody. I understand it. I think that we need to talk about it. It's definitely important because you look at the teams in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's specifically talk about the teams that if the season ended today, they would be in the playoffs, which would include the Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs, they went out and traded for DeAndre Hopkins and Josh Uche from the Patriots, a pass rusher. The Pittsburgh Steelers trade for Mike Williams and Preston Smith of the Green Bay Packers. The Baltimore Ravens trade for Deontay Johnson and the corner from the Rams, and forget Tre'Davious White.
Yeah.
And so you look at a number of these teams right now in the AFC that didn't stand pat. And you can't help but wonder, like, okay, what's the deal with the Denver Broncos here? Like, I mean, obviously those teams are in different positions. They're what people would consider to be contending teams, right? So they go out and they make contending team moves. The Buffalo Bills also traded for Amari Cooper. So the teams that would consider themselves to be true contenders did not stand pat at the trade deadline, whereas the Denver Broncos, they obviously did. And they traded away Baron Browning. They're hoping to get a number of guys back from injury. But I can't shake the idea, Cody, that Lil Jordan Humphrey is second on this team among wide receivers in targets, third overall behind Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams. I realize that not every player is going to be the right fit for Denver, but in terms of developing Bo Nix and supporting him and giving him guys that he can trust out there on the field, even if it is just a rental, I mean, the selfish part of me is saying some of these guys were traded for virtually nothing, like day 3 picks that don't matter. I mean, I find it interesting that all these other AFC playoff teams made moves to go get guys, including the Bengals, who are on the periphery right now. But the Denver Broncos obviously felt like they had enough in-house.
Yeah, and look, I think part of this is, conversations were obviously had. Some teams called the Broncos, but talks never really materialized. I'm sure some teams called and expressed interest in some other players here. But I think the Broncos right now, I think this is kind of a little bit of a forward-thinking approach. And look, I agree with you, Sayre. You and I have been banging the drum about Bo Nix needing another playmaker. Perhaps, Denver maybe inquired with some teams about a receiver or so, but maybe they didn't go as far as like, hey, like that's what we're willing to pay to maybe add this guy. I think when you look at the cost analysis, maybe we'll find out more about that. But as it also stands right now, we talk so much about free agency coming up this obviously in March. Denver has 11 unrestricted free agents, and I think there's going to have to be some discussions as to, okay, hey, who do you want to bring back, right? I think if you look at some UFAs right now, Garrett Bowles, obviously one of those. Left tackle, you're going to obviously have to address that for the future going forward after the season. DJ Jones in the last year of his deal, I'm sure they'll work out an extension with him. You've got Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, whereas I think Zach Wilson will sign on once again and be the backup to Bo Nix next season. Javonte Williams, you and I have discussed, entering a contract year. Really, this is it for him. Not sure if Denver's going to go that direction. Riley Dixon, Justin Sternad, who I think Sternad will be back, or he might get an opportunity elsewhere. Matt Parrott, Levi Wallace, and Quinn Bailey. Aside from that, you do have some cost control because there's only one restricted free agent, Mitchell Fabroni. You don't need to worry about that. Exclusive rights free agents, you got Lucas Kroll, Jaquan McMillan, Jordan Jackson, Devin Key, and Keidron Smith. So some really solid young guys. I think Denver right now, Sarah, they're going to take care of some of their in-house guys and some depth options. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Denver spend a little bit here in free agency, keep their draft picks, maybe double dip at some weapons or maybe offensive line. It seems like right now, because you mentioned a great point about those teams that made those trades. Those guys are contenders. Denver's not in that contender status yet. They're a ways away from that. So maybe they're focused on building the roster, which I also understand, right? I understand there's got to be some urgency because you can't just be Cortland Sutton being your leading target guy, Javonte Williams, your next leading target guy, and then Lil Jordan Humphrey. There needs to be more across the board. And there needs to be some other guys that probably get featured a lot more than some of those other two guys, like Javonte Williams, Lil Jordan Humphrey. To me, I think this is a stance by Sean Payton and George Payton saying, hey, we have to be patient. We're not in a position right now to go out there and make a big move to get a player because we still have other pieces we have to add. That's kind of how I'm reading it here. And I know, look, I understand Broncos Country wanted to add more playmakers. We agree. Not sure who that was going to be and not sure if, if Denver had interest, if they were in a position to make something like that materialize. Like guys that were talked about, Evan Ingram, they didn't go. David Njoku, they didn't go anywhere. So very, very curious to see how they approach free agency, which will probably be the next biggest step for them.
Yeah, and let's talk about the guys that could be reinforcements here in the near future for this team. Obviously, players that are already on the roster or one injury list or another, like Josh Reynolds, the wide receiver. Hopefully, the Broncos will be getting him back very soon. Safety PJ Locke, hopefully he'll be coming back. Luke Wattenberg as well, although Alex Forsyth has played quite well. We've talked about Drew Sanders getting some action here in the near future. So it's possible that some of the inactivity from the Broncos was due to the fact that they just don't have roster spots to really add a lot of guys right now, which I think is maybe the most reasonable thing of all. It hurts. It hurts to see Bo Nix having to, I mean, there has to be a concerted effort going forward to get Troy Franklin, even Marvin Mims, who I know has really struggled. I mean, you got to start chucking up shots to Marvin or try to get him some easy ones over the middle of the field. I mean, the Broncos have to do something to get these guys more involved, to make a concerted effort to get different players heavily involved in the offense. We know that Audric Estime is on the way, Cody, and the proof is in the pudding with some of these guys. Like when they are able to catch the ball or when they are getting opportunities, they're taking advantage of them. It's now about the volume needing to increase for these players. So we do need to see change in the personnel department offensively. We need other guys getting more opportunities than who currently is. And I think maybe that's just part of it, right? Is that numbers game overall just not playing into the Broncos' favor, ultimately with guys coming back from injury, which is a bit of a, it's kind of a, I don't know, you don't want to call it a win-lose or a lose-win or anything like that because you didn't make moves and you get these guys back because it's exciting that those guys are coming back, but it's still a tough pill to swallow when you want to have something right now.
I know we want our cake. We want to be able to eat it too, and certainly understand that. Like right now, Denver's got 52 spots on the 53-man roster. Interesting to see what they're going to do. Like I imagine there could be a couple of moves here, Sarah. It could be up to 3 moves here. Now, look, obviously Calvin Throckmorton's on the 53-man roster right now with Luke Wattenberg potentially returning here soon. I think that would more than likely lead to Throckmorton being released from the active roster, maybe signing back on the practice squad, though you can't elevate him anymore because he's out of those allotments for the season. But you're also, there's the notion that Quan Alexander is going to be brought to the 53-man roster soon. You mentioned the return of some other guys as well, like Josh Reynolds off of IR. You also mentioned even PJ Locke's not on IR, but it's like we expect maybe a couple of weeks for PJ to return to the mix. So what does that look like here for the Broncos? I'm very, very curious because it could lead to Throckmorton being released. We obviously talk about maybe even a guy like Lavelle Bailey at this point, just so you can bring another one of those guys up. I don't know how Denver's going to do it, but I know that there's going to be some shuffling here in the next 2 weeks there that we got to keep our eye on. And certainly we'll keep you posted here, Locked On Broncos. But overall, Broncos country, let us know your thoughts on the Broncos standing pat for 2 years in a row at the NFL trade deadline. We're going to open up our Broncos mailbag here on today's episode show. And Broncos country wants to know which players have been a surprise so far in the 2024 NFL season. We'll highlight who we have here on today's episode of the show. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at the Ultimate Football GM. And hey, Broncos fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM. Well, they're back and they've added an amazing new game mode that I need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a new head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring a coaching staff, now you also get to call offensive plays during games as well. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools that you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiating systems. So this fun and realistic game just got a lot better. If you already have it installed, be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode. And if you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I love it, and I know that you'll love it too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline, where you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use the promo code Locked On NFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage that you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks. And as you all know, at Prize Picks, it is daily fantasy sports done the right way, because Prize Picks, it's the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. They invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if the lineup is not perfect that you put together. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit inside the Prize Picks app. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. So check it out today. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. You can turn your sports opinions into real money all season long by making your picks in less than 60 seconds. So check it out. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
Already at 5 wins entering week 10, the Denver Broncos have exceeded expectations for a lot of people, but which players have exceeded expectations thus far? I know we spend a lot of time over the course of the year talking about, well, in the offseason, all 90 guys on the roster, but there are still some surprises to be found on this Broncos roster. And Cody and I, we're going to talk about that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. I want to say thank you first and foremost to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate all you everydayers out there. You know that your boys, Cody and Sayre, will be here for you all year long, covering the team that you love, the Denver Broncos. And Cody, some surprises on this Denver Broncos roster in the positive way. We had a question that was sent in. I know you post over there on YouTube, seeking out if anybody ever wants to participate in that. You can participate in the community tab on YouTube there. This question was sent in by, I'm going to just, the letters here, AJIGAC on YouTube. Here's what we got. The biggest surprise in a positive way on the roster so far in 2024. Cody, when you hear that question posed or that prompt posed, who really stands out to you the most?
I mean, I think there's a handful of players that certainly deserve some consideration. I think Bo Nix would be an easy answer, right? I think we've all been very surprised and pleased with where he's been at. I'm going to kind of go against the grain here a little bit. I'm going to highlight a guy that probably doesn't get a lot of glory. I'm going to go with Alex Forsyth. I think he's done a tremendous job as of late, stepping in for Luke Wattenberg, who won the starting job in training camp. Alex Forsyth is playing so well to the point, right? And I think the thing about Alex in comparison to Luke, they're locker buddies, by the way. The thing with Luke, I think Luke is stronger at the point of attack. I think Forsyth is the more finesse player, right? I think this is a guy who understands angles. He understands how to seal defenders. He understands his lateral footwork is great in terms of being able to move and communicate in terms of like different stunts that are happening. Like if his guy's crossing his face, he can pass him off to Quinn, and there's a guy coming from the outside in. He knows how to pick it up. I've liked what I've seen from him on film. You haven't seen any low snaps. You haven't seen any high snaps from him. I think the Broncos' run game has been a little bit better as of late with him at the center position. Not saying that's the rhyme or the reason, but I think Alex Forsyth has played enough here to where when Luke Wattenberg returns, I don't know if Luke's going to get the starting job back. I think I would roll with Alex. He's been impressive to me as kind of one of the under the radar. Nobody's probably going to talk about him enough. What about you? Who do you have your eyes on? Because there's a handful of like obvious ones that we could talk about.
Yeah, there really are. I think one of the biggest surprises for me and maybe a lot of people is Brandon Jones, the safety that was acquired in free agency. I know we talked all offseason, like, all right, whoever's going to be filling in for Justin Simmons, they got some big shoes to fill. And then Brandon Jones comes in and we're kind of like, okay, yeah, I mean, Pro Football Focus really liked him last year, but what does that really mean? And he's never really been a full-time starter at the NFL level. And what is he going to bring to the table? Man, especially after missing training camp and the preseason and a lot of OTAs as well, I think I was very skeptical of Brandon Jones coming in and playing as well as he has, but he's been outstanding, Cody, for the Denver Broncos in that secondary. He's been one of the most consistent guys back there, and he's got those ball skills that they talked about in free agency. And when people said, hey, this guy can make plays on the football, he just hasn't gotten a ton of opportunities. He's proven that for the Denver Broncos. So I really like what we've seen from Brandon Jones so far this year. And I know it would be great to have Justin Simmons stick around and be a Bronco for life, of course. But man, Brandon has played well, and he gives the Broncos a young option at that safety position for the next handful of years here to hopefully grow and continue to develop as a playmaker in the secondary.
Yeah, and I would even say Riley Moss has probably been another player we could talk about as having one of the more impressive seasons, I think, in terms of where the expectations were. It was a question mark as well, really going to the offseason. And then when I started watching him in OTAs and I watched him in training camp, I started thinking, I was like, yeah, I'm not worried about him. I think this guy's going to play really, really well. And certainly he has answered the bell this season. He's a good tackler. He's been great in coverage here for the Broncos. I just think there's so many different players we could highlight here, Sayre, because this was a roster that was projected by a lot of national outlets that, well, they don't have a lot of star power. They don't really have anybody that's big named. And certainly, while that may be the case, they have good players. They have guys that are also good role players as well. And I think that's a testament to, where this team is at. And I think that overall, the consensus in Broncos country, I think the fan base thinks and believes that this team is in a better position right now. And they're in a better position going forward, which I certainly agree with them there on that, considering that they've exceeded expectations so far. They can stay healthy. I like the direction that this roster is going. I think there's been a handful of guys that have obviously been impressive. And it'll also kind of tie into our final question we got on our mailbag today as well, because it's going to highlight rookies we've been the most impressed with. I think this year's rookie class is playing pretty significant minutes right now here on the field. We'll obviously address that here in a little bit. Is there, like, if you had to give an under the radar player, right? I gave one obviously at the start with Forsyth. If you could give one under the radar player from your perspective that you feel like is been a big surprise in a good way, who do you think it is?
I kind of want to go with Cody Barton in that regard, because when he signed in free agency, obviously it was the Alex Singleton treatment from a handful of years ago, where every fan base that's had Cody Barton up to this point was like, oh, good luck with that guy. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, he went out and had the game of his life against the New Orleans Saints. He's been playing pretty well since the start of the season, Cody. I haven't really noticed anything overly negative about his game.
Yeah.
And especially that Saints game where, man, the ball doesn't really bounce your direction that often in the NFL, but that guy could have had 3 defensive touchdowns almost in that game alone. So it's been pretty crazy to see. I think he's had a much better season than a lot of people expected, especially given kind of the price point when you acquire him in free agency, even the fact that he was competing for a job throughout the course of the offseason. I've been pleasantly surprised by him and what he's been able to bring to the table. There's a lot of underrated factors on that defense. I think you could even go so far as to say, like, people underrated the John Franklin Myers trade. Like nobody talked about that in the offseason. The Malcolm Roach addition, that was not really getting a lot of headlines and wasn't selling a ton of magazines, things like that. But he's been a very good player. So those types of moves that flew under the radar when they were made, they've really paid dividends, especially when you talk about that defensive front seven, how much tougher they've been for the Broncos this season.
I agree with you there. In Broncos country, we want to know your thoughts as always. Which players have been a pleasant surprise for you so far in the 2024 NFL season? We'll also shift gears to our final mailbag question of the day. One listener in Broncos country asks, which rookies have been the most impressive? How would we assess this year's rookie class? We'll break that down and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you all know it, Broncos Country, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers, when they sign up, can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place alongside a handful of other sports. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets, whether that's parlays, whether that's money lines, point spreads, player props, anytime touchdowns. FanDuel has it all inside the app for the NFL season. On top of that, the NBA season, the NHL season, college football, they've got everything. So join and visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Check it out today, FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, I want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos country. Thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen every single day. We appreciate you so much, Broncos country, for all that you do to make this show exactly what it is. We like to reward you, obviously, by being able to answer as many of your questions as possible. You want a chance to be featured in our weekly mailbag. Make sure you check out the community page on the YouTube page every single week. On Mondays, we'll post the prompt. You get it in there, and we'll try to pick the best ones that we can here for the show. We appreciate you so much here. We get a question in here from Zaddy215 on YouTube. Sometimes you got to read these usernames very, very carefully, Sayre. You never know here. But he asked the question, how would you assess the Broncos rookie class through the midway point of the season? I mean, Sayre, I think when we look at it right now, a large portion of these players are playing impact minutes right now. I mean, let's look at the Broncos rookie free agency class. You got Bo Nix, starting quarterback, Jonah Ellis playing a prominent role in a rotational position. Troy Franklin is on the field so much more and is being more featured inside the offense. You know, you talk about, obviously, Audric Estime. We're going to see more of him here soon. Chris Abrams-Drain is a player who's kind of in a red shirt type of approach right now. Not necessarily like Denver's cornerback depth is very strong right now, which is why he's not activated. He's been on the inactive list. And then, the list just continues to go on and on. I know there's Nick Gargiulo no longer on the team. And your thoughts initially here on this rookie class, Sayre?
I really like this rookie class a lot. I know Sean Payton is very high on this rookie class as well. Cody, Devon Vele playing a big role, of course.
Why did I just forget Devon Vele? My goodness.
That's all right. Hey,
it's because he's 27 years old. He's not really a rookie. But
yeah, he's not really a rookie. I mean, he's been playing football for a lot longer than some of these guys. But no, I think it's been a very good rookie class. Of course, you start with Bo Nix, just named the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Month for October. He seems to be continually improving. I think we'll continue to see Jonah Ellis making a big impact, especially now Baron Browning has been traded, clearing the way for Jonah to really play a lot more snaps for this defense, which I think he's earned. And I think he deserves that. And then you talk about Troy Franklin, the success rate on passes thrown to Troy Franklin at this point, very, very low. We want to see the Broncos continue to give him opportunities, maybe get a couple more gimme type opportunities for him so he can create after the catch, but getting that timing down on those deep passes that he's been thrown a handful of times this year, that he's dropped a couple, Bo's missed him on a couple. I think getting that timing down is going to be very exciting over the second half of the season for Broncos country. And then Audric Estime is that guy that right now, Cody, he's going to be the X factor, I think, of this draft class, because he's going to come out there and hopefully in the second half of the season, we see a surge in carries for him, because I was looking at the numbers today. It's kind of crazy. He's played in 5 games. Remember, he was on temporary IR, missed 4 weeks of the season. So he's played in 5 games. In 4 of those games, he has had a carry for at least 11 or more yards. So at least one. And so I think, to me, you look at that when you talk about explosive plays and the consistency with which he's getting those, it's kind of crazy. Had a 21-yard run against the Baltimore Ravens. The biggest question has been, is he going to be able to hang on to the football? And I think that if he can do that, I mean, that seems like a big if at this point. He's had 3 fumbles dating back to the preseason, but Estime to me is that guy that's like, okay, when he arrives, the offensive dynamic for this team kind of changes substantially.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And look, we've had some people as well, because we did an episode about what Sean Payton said about Audric Estime, and some of the responses were, well, he fumbles the ball too much. You can't put him in the game. Like, how do you expect him to get better? Like, you got to have more opportunities, more reps to prevent yourself from fumbling, right? Like, it's about like, yeah, you fumbled some of your other snaps here, once in the preseason. It led to a touchdown, early on. You fumbled one against the Seattle Seahawks. Luckily, it was recovered by Adam Troutman. You had one that obviously got lost, a couple of weeks ago here. But overall, you need the reps. And if you continue to fumble, then you're going to lose reps. I think that's the thing. Keep giving him reps and keep giving him a little bit more and more as you keep going. The talent is there. The flashes are certainly there. I'm very curious to see how that is going to change, for Denver's offense here in the next handful of weeks here, especially with the forward focus that Sean Payton has on getting these young guys more playing time. Like we've said it before, Sean has told people in the national media that they believe that Estime was kind of their steal of the draft. Like when everything had all happened, I think if we look at it right now, I think Jonah Ellis was a steal for them. I think Devon Vele, for him being a 7th rounder, I think is a steal from where they're at. I'm excited to see how this young team progresses forward here. Estime is the youngest player right now on the Broncos. If I'm not mistaken, I think he just turned 20 or 21, literally a month ago, 2 months ago. So, I mean, he's the youngest guy on your team. And look, he's going to make mistakes, but man, he's a big, bruising, big body back that can make plays. I think he can be good in the run blocking, the pass protection department. And then obviously as a runner, as we have seen there. And I think the approach too, somebody said like, well, he got a big carry against the Ravens in garbage time. Look, I think garbage time really equates to the secondary more so. The defensive line, the linebackers, they don't change how they play you when you have a big lead. They're still trying to stop you and wrap you up. It's different in the passing game. You tend to play softer coverage in the pass game, but you still have to stop the run. The teams aren't just going to go out there and allow someone to rip off a 45-yard run in garbage time just for the fun of it. So excited to see a little bit more of him. I've really liked Vele, man. And look, Vele's been such a smart player. You can see his high football IQ, especially in the scramble drill. I would like to see him used a little bit more in the quick passing game, right? The New Orleans Saints game, we got to see some RPO stuff, fake the inside handoff, find him on a quick slant, and let him do damage yards after the catch. Same with Troy Franklin, right? But since that point, we haven't seen that really be an approach for Troy Franklin. Like, I want to see Troy catch the ball in space and make plays. I think that Denver's 2 receivers here in this year's draft class, they can be so much better. And I think that we will see an emphasis on getting them the football. Yes, you got to hit the deep shots, but hey, you can't just use these guys on deep shots. Get them the ball in space and see what they can do. And that'll help take the pressure off of Courtland Sutton. And maybe it'll allow for one of these guys to emerge as a potential playmaker,
which I think we very much need over the course of the back half of this season. Like we've talked about it ad nauseum at this point. I mean, the Broncos need somebody else to jump up into the top half of the overall targets on this team, or the top third of the targets on this team. I love what Devon Vele has been able to do in the limited sample that we've seen after the catch, at the catch point, just being the fact that he went down and dug that ball out of the ground against the Ravens. I know that ultimately it didn't matter on the final score and things like that, but man, he's a player. He made that play near the sideline a couple of weeks ago, Cody, that was just like, dang, like that's a tough catch. And he was out there making some tough catches for his quarterback. So get the guy more snaps, Payton. I don't know what we're doing. Let's get Devon Vele out there and give him Lil Jordan Humphrey snaps. I feel like I'm dogging on Lil Jordan. I'm not trying to, we want the Broncos to figure some things out offensively and make sure that Bo Nix is able to succeed. Like, We don't want to be posting highlight reels of this guy throwing the ball and it hitting a receiver in the hands, or a receiver catching it and then fumbling, or a receiver tipping it up in the air and into the waiting arms of the other team. We want to see these guys making plays. And so I think it would be much more palatable if it was the rookies that were out there tipping the ball up and struggling with this, as opposed to guys that have been in the league for a handful of years at this point, or even Marvin Mims, who we had such high expectations for. It's just a little bit tougher pill to swallow. So the youth movement is on in Denver. I like it. I'm here for it. I'm here for the failing forward, but I'm also here for these guys, especially starting this week against Kansas City. Like, let's figure some stuff out. Let's go make some plays and go steal a win at Arrowhead.
Yeah, it's going to be big. Stakes are massive this week here for the Broncos. I feel like it is a game that they can win. Look, it's going to be tough. Kansas City, they're undefeated. And the scary thing about that is they're undefeated and they're not playing their best yet. Like, that's the thing I think that is scary. But it's like, you have a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team on Monday Night Football that takes them to overtime without Chris Godwin, without Mike Evans. It's like all of a sudden, people wanted to move the goalpost saying, whoa, Denver's week 3 victory against the Buccaneers don't count because they're terrible because they have all these injuries now. Denver played that offense at full strength in terms of the weapons that they had. Bo Nix had a tremendous game. Yeah, no Vita Vea in that one, but you know what? Like, Denver beat a really good team on the road, and now they have a chance to do that here against Kansas City, a game that is winnable, but it's going to be a challenge. And obviously, we'll have you covered every step of the way. Sayre's going to sit down with one of the hosts, either Ryan Tracy or Chris Clark of the Locked On Chiefs podcast this week for a crossover Thursday edition. You can expect that as well. And Broncos Country will have you covered. The Broncos back on the practice field on Wednesday. We'll also have the AFC Squad Show premiering here on your Locked On Broncos feed, wherever you get your podcast as well. There's a lot of excitement going on right now. Broncos Country, thanks for making us your first listen. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.